Welcome to the next installment on my top 100 board games list. We are climbing ever higher and this time covering installments number 21 through 30 on my list. So these are amazing games and I would be extremely excited to play any of them. The theme for this list is needing to anticipate what comes next. I mean, in the game, not in terms of like anticipating the game after it because you're so bored. Yeah, a few of these sort of let you fly by the seat of your pants, but a lot of these are very much you have to kind of plan several moves ahead in order to be successful, which is something I tend to really like in games, so I'm very happy that this is the theme for this set of 10. Alright, so without further ado, let's get started with this set of 10 in my top 100 games. My number 30 is a game that I actually just played last night, although it was online, with my family, and it is The Crew, The Quest for Planet 9. Now, I might like it a little bit better if it was The Quest for Plan 9 from outer space, but that's nitpicking in the extreme. It is up 25 spots on my list. I really like this. Its weight is about 3, and it plays 3 to 5 players. Although, just right off the bat, I should give a small caveat about the weight on this game. Trick-taking games, even if they're not particularly complex, can be kind of confusing for new players. So, although this is actually a pretty good one to get people started with because it's cooperative, and that's sort of what sets it apart from other trick-taking games, it is still maybe a little bit harder to teach than you would think just by looking at the thin rulebook and the relative paucity of rules. So yes, The Crew is an amazing game. It is a cooperative trick-taking game, as I mentioned, which is something that, as far as I know, has not been done before. You are trying to get specific cards to specific people, and sometimes you have to do it in certain orders, and you can't tell people what you have in your hand. You can only really sort of make observations like, oh, pink led, and Zach didn't follow with pink, so he must be out of pink, because that's kind of how trick-taking works. You can make observations like that, but you can't directly say, I have a green 7. No. You can indicate that you have a card in your hand sometimes, not in all the missions, because it's like a mission-based structure where each mission is its own challenge, and there are certain conditions you have to fulfill in order to win, and certain conditions that will cause you to lose. And you can say, okay, this card right here, you can hold it up, it's a green 7, this is my highest green card, and you indicate that on the card. But that's all you can say about it, and that's the only thing you can say. Then you can't say anything about any of your pink cards or whatever. It's a fascinating game. It has a little bit of story to it, which is surprising for a trick-taking game, because trick-taking is maybe, along with possibly dexterity games, one of the genres that is just expected to not have any theme or story to it at all, but it's here. Even if it is just some flavor text, that's more than most trick-taking games will give you, and it's actually kind of cool that it's there. There's just a lot to recommend about this. If you want to sort of dip your toe into trick-taking games, I would start with this one, and then try working your way into one of the more interesting ones. The only caveat is that there aren't a lot of trick-taking games that are extremely popular, so it can be kind of hard to find the one you want in print. So if you hear about something like Indulgence, which was on my list earlier, or Monster Trick, which is a trick-taking game I would like to try, it just might not be available. So that's a bit of a problem when you're trying to get into trick-taking games, whereas other genres of games you can kind of find games for it more easily. But it's a terrific game, and I would recommend it to just about anyone. My number 30, The Crew. My number 29 I don't have here for a change, and it is Sheriff of Nottingham. This is a game that my family owns, but I do not. It is down 3 spots, so it's about the same place as it was last time. Its weight is about a 3, and will play 3 to 6 players. 6 players if you have the expansion or the second edition. Either way, if you can play 6 players, it works good. You just tweak the rules slightly so it doesn't end up running too long. Sheriff of Nottingham is a bluffing game, and it is adjacent to the social deduction genre. It's adjacent because you aren't forced to lie by virtue of the card you're dealt. In a game like The Resistance or Avalon or Deception Murder in Hong Kong, if you get dealt the spy or the traitor or the murderer card, your job is going to be to lie and to come across as truthful. In this one, you're never really forced to do that. You can kind of just tell the truth the entire time if you want, and it may be possible to win. It's when you want to lie that is up to you. So it's a great bluffing game because it's like you stick things in your bag and say, it's 4 chickens. You might be telling the truth, or you might be lying, and there's no real forced element in the game where it's like you have to have put 4 chickens in, other than maybe your cards just had a lot of contraband in them and you have to lie about those, or maybe you just had a lot of like legal goods and so you're sort of pushed slightly more towards, but you can just put less stuff in your bag. You can say, I only have 2 bread or something like that, or 1 cheese, and just push that through. It's up to you, and there's just money flying around, there's negotiation, there's like, I don't believe you, I will pay you money to open their bag. It's just kind of chaotic, and there's a little bit of role-playing in this game, which is quite lovely. It's a terrific game. I haven't played it much lately because A, I don't own it, and B, you kind of want to play it in person. You don't necessarily want to play this over the internet. I don't think I would want to anyway. I would also imagine it would just be hard to implement with the sort of free-flowing cash flying around, depending on which deals you make, element to the game. But it's a lot of fun. I would like to check out the 2nd edition at some point. Maybe I'll pick it up. Maybe I won't. But it's just a game that I've had a lot of good memories with, and I would be very happy to play again. So that is my number 29, Sheriff of Nottingham. So remember how I said earlier Mage Knight board game was probably the most complicated game that I had on this list? This one is close. This is my number 28. It's Lisboa, and it's new to my list, and it's a game I've owned for a while, but it's new to my list because this is the first time I've had a chance to play it enough to really rank it. And it's amazingly complicated, and it's really, really good, and boy, are there few people that I can play this with. Its weight is a 10, as you might imagine, and it plays 1 to 4 players. I've played this, I think, at 3 and a solo a couple of times, and that's been about it. But I really like the game. I like the fact that it's really hard for me to grasp. I like the fact that there are these really intricate systems bouncing around that sort of hit off of each other and rebound and collide and conflict, and you have to balance them all. I love doing that in a game. This one is almost at the limit of what I can actually handle in a game. And you know what? The thing is, when you're dealing with a game of this complexity, it's often manageable if you just play it a lot. But I also own well over 100 games, and it's hard for me to give any one game or even just a handful of games that kind of attention. So yes, maybe if I treated this like this was one of my like 3 or 4 favorite games and just played it like a couple times a month, I would just get everything down pat. But as it stands, I come back to it every few months, and I have to sort of relearn a lot of the details and go, oh, right, that's how this works in this game. Even right now, off the top of my head, I can't even remember everything that goes on in this game. I remember you're clearing rubble from a board, and the rubble that you clear gives you different abilities, and you can also plant houses on these places, which gives you points, and that also unlocks other abilities, and you're playing cards, and other cards are giving you endgame bonus points. There's just a lot going on, and there are just like even the basics of how a turn is structured is like several layers deep. There's like, okay, there's the first layer of which of the 3 categories it goes into, and then there's the layer of, is it in the column A action, the primary action, or is it in the secondary actions that you can do maybe a couple of? And if it's in the secondary action, there's 2 for each of the 3 guys, and which one of those are you doing? And then there's also, like, depending on which cards, like, which things you play specifically, you can kind of do the primary ability, and then maybe one of the secondary abilities of the same dude at the same time. And, yeah, it's just got a lot of interlocking parts. The theme of rebuilding Lisboa after several consecutive natural disasters is actually, I think, really interesting, and I like it. It's more evocative than just what you might find in a game where it's just like you're just trading in the 17th century or what have you, in the Mediterranean or in Europe or something like that. And because there's like some drama implicit in, oh, this place has actually just been pummeled recently, and you're trying to get it back up and running. So there's a lot I like about this one. I just wonder if it might be destined to never be able to break into my top 10 by virtue of how much I have to relearn it. I think a similar thing has happened with Mage Knight, where I really, really like it, but I just don't play it often enough, and I can only play it when I feel up to relearning a lot of rules, and I think this is kind of in a similar place. I don't know if it'll ever get over that hump, but even needing to relearn it every so often, I still would really like it and would be very, very happy to play this. But this is, I think, I own 3 Vita Lacerda games. Lisboa is the most confusing and complex of them, but in my view, by a decent margin, and he always does fairly complex games. So that's my number 28, Lisboa. Okay, so I like dice rolling as an activity, but my primary means of playing a game is something in which I'm going to be strategically managing my choices in order to maximize my number of points. For that kind of game, usually the mechanism to implement it is worker placement, and that makes sense because worker placement is not random in the slightest. Dice rolling tends to be too random for games that are like heavy strategic games. And this is sort of the exception game that sort of captures multiple things that I like. This is my number 27, Roll for the Galaxy. Roll for the Galaxy is up 3 places on my list. Its weight is about a 6, and it plays 2 to 5 players. Okay, so Roll for the Galaxy is a sequel of sorts to Race for the Galaxy, which is a card game. And there are a lot of similarities in terms of how both of those games work. This one is all about dice. Those dice are custom, and they're color-coded. So what a red dice is going to do is different from what a purple dice is going to do, which is different from what a green dice is going to do, which is different from the generic white dice and what they do. So a lot of what you're going to be doing is getting more dice and getting different dice and getting dice that sort of push you in one direction or another in terms of like strategic paths towards victory. A lot of the things about like collecting resources and collecting planets functions the same, about phases going off if players select them and not if they don't. That's still here, but I'm just more familiar with this one, and I just really like it, and I like the fact that I have a game here that involves actually rolling dice to see what you get, because a lot of the games I like that have dice rolling in them are like, you roll the dice and then that determines what resources are available, and then you draft them later. So like there's no inherent drama in the actual rolling of the dice. You just sort of see how the lay of the land is going to look based on the die roll. And it's like usually once per round. Now this is once per turn. You're rolling the dice and you have to deal with whatever you get. You can mitigate that. You can micromanage things through various mechanisms, like you can use fewer dice and still get to distribute a die in the right place, and you can get powers that will let you put dice in places where you otherwise couldn't, and you can get dice that tend to have more sides that are the sides that you want. That's all in there, and that's great. That means the game is strategic, but it's still a dice rolling, dice chucking game at its essence. And it's also like a fairly sophisticated Euro-style strategy game at the same time, which is fairly rare. It feels like a dice game rather than a game that just happens to use some dice, which is sort of how I'd characterize like Le Grand Ha, or even A Feast for Odin, which does have a little bit of like you roll and you hope for the best, which is, I guess, what I'm looking for here. But even that one, it's still like, it's a little bit of push your luck, and it's only when you go to certain places, so you can avoid it the entire game if you just choose a strategy that doesn't involve rolling the dice at all. I really like it. I like it for a lot of the same reasons I like Race for the Galaxy. I played this one first. I only got around to playing Race for the Galaxy online and online only, And well after I'd played Roll for the Galaxy, and having had played Roll for the Galaxy, I was like, oh, okay, I see where they got all of the elements here. This is maybe a game I should try to make a point to play more often, just because it is fairly unique for what it does, in that it gives me that dice chucking flavor without jettisoning the tricky, intricate decision making that I'm usually looking for in most of my games. So it's great. The fact that it's up slightly is actually means I'm warming to it a fair amount, because with new games hitting my list, it's actually much easier for things to slip down my ratings. It's a terrific game. I would be happy to play this anytime, any number of players. That is Roll for the Galaxy. Well, get ready for some hate, people, because this is one of the games that I just find a ton of the people I teach it to just really don't like this game, and that is my number 26, Ricochet Robots. Ricochet Robots is down one spot, so it's almost an identical placement on my list. Its weight is a 1, although that's a little deceptive. We'll talk about why in a moment, and it plays between 1 and 15 people, I would say, but I only capped it at 15 because that's how many people I think you can maybe cram around a table to do this. There are ways you could theoretically do this that would let you play pretty much any number of players you wanted. You just have to figure out how to set it up, and we'll talk about why. Ricochet Robots is a game that is functionally very simple to explain. You have robots on the board. Those robots will go in straight lines, and they will not stop until they hit either a wall or another robot. You have to figure out a way to move a robot to its corresponding chip that comes up. So a red star will come up. That means you have to move the red robot to the location with the red star, or a green Saturn-looking planet is up. You have to move the green robot to the green Saturn spot. You can move all of the robots, but you're trying to... So you can specifically move a robot that you're not trying to get to the spot, like the yellow one, for the sole purpose of like setting it up so that they bounce off each other a little differently. But you have to try to get the robot into the corresponding spot on the chip in as few moves as possible. Other problem. Everyone's trying to figure this out at the exact same time. The first person to say a number, so I say, okay, I can get the red robot to the red star spot in 7 moves. I flip a 30-second timer. Everyone has until the timer expires to come up with their own solution. So let's say one other person says 6, another person says 9, and another person says 12. Okay. Everyone else is like, I don't know what to pick. The person who said the lowest number goes first and tries to prove that they can do it. If they can, they get the chip. If they can't do it, they reset the robots back to where they were and let the next person, in this case me, who said I could do it in 7 moves, try to prove it, and if I can do it in 7, I get the chip, and if I can't, again, it goes to the next person. If none of us can actually physically get the robot in there in the number of moves that we said, and it has to be in that number of moves, then nobody gets the chip. And then whoever has the most chips at the end of the game, which is I think like 16 chips for 16 spots that the robots can go, that person is the overall winner. Okay, here's the thing. It's really stressful because you're having to like visualize these robots bouncing all around these walls, and trying to like plan ahead, which is sort of where the theme comes in here. To say, okay, if I move this robot here, and then I move this robot here, and then I move that robot to there, and that robot blocks there, which means I can move him down this column, which means that I can get him to hit this wall, which means I can bounce him off this other wall, and then I think that's 8 moves, so I'm going to say 8. The time pressure, I think, is what gets most people, because you have to try to do this very quickly. So it's not a complicated set of rules. I've taught you most of what you need to know in order to play the game. What is complicated is like trying to get your mind to do this as fast as you can physically visualize and plan ahead and get everything lined up so you know the right number of moves. And then you still might get outbid by someone else who's like, oh, I can do this in 9 moves, and then someone else says 5. And you're like, how? Why? How? So I think it just stresses some people out, but I find the puzzle really fascinating. It does suffer from a problem of that I think is intrinsic to these sorts of games, which is like if you are playing this, you really need to be playing against someone who is at least roughly as good as you are at it, and not significantly better or significantly worse, or otherwise you just won't have a good time. It's no fun to get crushed, and it's no fun to crush other people. But if you can find someone who will give you a good run for your money and will at least stay close to you and score, this is a pretty great game to play. And you can play it solo if you just can't find anyone to play with, because basically you can just try to set it up so you can visualize them as fast as possible, which may be a good way to try to get better at it and then eventually be able to take on people who are better than you currently. So I really like it. I just wish I had more people who also liked it that I could play this with. So that is my number 26, Ricochet Robots. Okay, my number 25 is something that actually goes by various names. I call it Telephone Pictionary, but it also goes by Eat Poop You Cat. Yes, really. And it also has a published physical version that goes under the name of Telestrations. It's essentially the same game in all those cases, except don't play the Telestrations version by playing for points, because that kind of defeats the purpose of why this game is fun. Its weight is 1, and there are no caveats here. It is a dead simple game. And its player range is probably for about between 5 players at the low end to about 16 players at the high end. I think any more than that, and it's just going to take too long. Telephone Pictionary is a very simple game, and I can teach it to you by explaining it. No caveats or anything. Everyone starts by writing down a word or a phrase on a set of pieces of paper that are equal to the number of players around the table. So if there are 9 people around the table playing this game, you each want 9 pieces of paper, stapled together preferably, and then each person writes a sentence or a word on the first piece of paper and then passes the entire set of papers to the person to their left or right. Doesn't matter which way you go, as long as you stay consistent. So you pass it to the left. You then look at the sentence that you were just given, and you draw a picture on the next piece of paper. So you draw a picture, well or poorly, doesn't matter too much. Then you pass it to the other person. When you get the next one, you only look at the thing that was most recently done, whether it was a drawing or a bit of writing, and either describe the picture that you just saw drawn with some words, or draw a picture to fit the words on the page, and then you keep passing it along. And again, you always only look at the thing that was most recently done. You do this until it's gone all the way around the circle, and then you just all individually look at what happened from your original sentence or word, and see the picture, and then the words describing that picture, and then the picture of those words, and so on, all the way down until you see the end. This game is terrific. It is incredibly simple. It is easy to play with large groups of people. It is easy to play with just about anyone. You don't need to really have any kind of gaming literacy to play and enjoy this. All you need to do is really just take the time to sit down to get the pieces of paper ready, which is why some people prefer to play Telestrations, but that also limits your flexibility, because I think even if you get the larger pack, you're limited to 12 players, and you can do more than that. It starts to get longer after the 12th player, but you can do it. I think, again, my upper limit would probably be about 16 people. It also, I think, tends to be better if you have an odd number of players rather than an even number of players, because then it tends to begin and end with a sentence. And while the drawings are funny, I find that the sentences that try to describe what's going on and the chaos that is the drawings is often funnier. So I tend to prefer a group of players that's odd, so we can begin and end with a sentence, but your mileage may vary. There's very little for me to try to explain for why I like this. I just think that the results are hilarious. And it's also why I wouldn't play the version in Telestrations that actually gives you points, because I think it rewards you for things staying the same, which is not what you want at all. You want to see the hilarious journey of a sentence about a bumblebee turning into the Iraqi war or something like that. A bee, and then the word bee, and then another drawing of bee, and then the word "be" over and over again is not interesting. It's just not. It doesn't matter how bad the drawings of the bee are. It's just a bee over and over again. So yeah, play this where you're intentionally trying to create some chaos, and you will have a better time. I always try to interpret things as weirdly as I can, and the results tend to be better for it. Maybe there needs to be some balance between people who are a little bit more straight-laced and people like myself, but that's up for debate. So, again, because this is just a bunch of pieces of paper, I don't have a physical version to show you. I don't own Telestration, so I can't show you that either. But go play it. Like, you can play it with anyone, anytime you're in a large group. So do it as a post-COVID party. Anyways, that is my number 25. Telephone Pictionaries, i.e. Telestrations, i.e. Eat Poop You Cat. My number 24 is Tekhenu Obelisk of the Sun. It is down 6 spots, so it was sitting higher. Its weight is about an 8, and it plays 1 to 4 players. Okay, so Tekhenu is a game that I played once and then just immediately put into my top 20 games of all time last time I did this list. Tekhenu is great. It's a sequel to another game I love. It's a sequel to a couple of games I really like, Tzolk'in and Teotihuacan. We already talked about Teotihuacan. And this is a game of dice drafting. You basically have 6 different spots that you can draft dice from, and you get different actions from them depending on which one you draft dice from. There's some resource management. There's some claiming spots with your buildings. There's like putting out different pieces of your color. There's managing your happiness and population tracks. There's a lot going on in this game, but there's a very interesting puzzle at the core of it, which is you want to avoid having an excess of too many dice that are from the pure layer and too many that are from tainted layer, because if you have too many of either, you end up losing turn order and losing some points. So there's this double effect of like, what do I want to do, and also how can I make the dice that I draft do it work within that puzzle? Because maybe I just have, like, I desperately need pure dice, but the pure dice are not in the areas where I want to take an action. And what are you going to do? Where are you going to take the hit? Are you going to take the action you want, or are you going to take the die you need to balance off your thing so you have better, like, so you're the first player in the subsequent rounds? The puzzle here is terrific. I've only played this 2 and solo. Solo was still, the game was still really enjoyable, but I found it was like a little convoluted in terms of like running the solo player in this one. So I don't know how much I'll go back to it as a solo game. I just really like this game. I want to play it more, and it's such a fascinating puzzle of like how and when to draft things, and you never feel like you have enough time, which is something I always like in strategy board games. Is like there's never enough time, so what do I spend the time I do have on? I really want to play this at 3. I think 4 might be a little much unless everyone knows what they're doing already. But I would just like that sort of more competitive element of people being in all the different places on the board and having that potentially affect what you're going for. There's just so many things going on in this game. I don't even know how I would try to explain this to someone who's new, and I probably wouldn't. I would pick something else. But if I had like 2 other experienced gamers who already kind of know what to do in games, I would absolutely love to play this, and I could see this actually going up on my list again, because there's just something really fascinating about the core puzzle here that I think might get this into my top 20 again, and possibly into my top 10, although I would need to play it a decent amount more before it gets there. So that's my number 24, Tekhenu. Boy, do I just want to play this with people. My number 23 is Coinbra. Coinbra is down 4 spots on my list. Its weight is about an 8, and it plays 2 to 4 players. And it's really unfortunate that there isn't a solo mode. maybe one of the expansions has it. I think there might be one expansion out. I wonder if that has a solo mode in it. Probably not. Okay, I really like Coinbra. There's something, if there's something that I have weakness for in board gaming, besides worker placement and auction mechanisms, it would be tracks to race up on, tracks that give you points, but especially tracks that give you in-game benefits that just make your engine run better. This has 4 key tracks that are both for a good amount of end-game bonus points and also for your income over the course of the game. There's also a dice drafting mechanism. This is maybe the opposite of what I was talking about in Roll for the Galaxy, where it's like you roll the dice and then you see what you do with them. You draft them based on what their numbers are and what their colors are. It's a lot of fun. This is very much a game that I think is catering to me and what I like about Euro games. It is a game that I always feel like it doesn't feel like it takes as long as it actually objectively does to play. Like, it is consistently taking 90 minutes and 2 hours, 2.5 hours to finish a game of it. And I always feel like, really? That felt like an hour. It's a game with a very sort of... I don't even know how to describe the aesthetic, but sort of a little fanciful, a little angular. It's just full of things that I like. I like drafting the dice. I like placing the dice in order to get cards, and then using the cards to raise up tracks and gain other benefits. And then the benefits that you gain can be more permanent over the course of the game. And then there's a map to explore, which is always a side mechanic I like, which is like you have a little guy roaming around a map, and you can gain positive effects as he wanders around more and more. There's just a lot going on here that I really, really like. And it's a game that plays really well at 2, because I've played it several times at 2. And I haven't played it with more players, and I've heard it's better with more players, so I really need to... It's another game I need to get with like 3, maybe 4 players around a table to play, to sort of see how it works with more competition in the game. It's a terrific game. I just wish I had more time to play it. So that is my number 23, Coinbra. My number 22 is Gaia Project, and Gaia Project is new to my list. Its weight is about a 9. It's pretty heavy, and plays 1 to 4 players. So I've had Gaia Project for a while, but the problem that I had for the longest time was that I would consistently get to play it with no one. No, I would consistently not play it, is another way to say it. What I would end up playing instead was Terra Mystica, because I knew it better and could teach it more easily. And if I have an opportunity to play a heavier strategy game, there are only so many options that I have that I can easily make work. Gaia Project is a game that is now on my list because I've played it a few times solo, and that's given me a better feel for what the game is like. And the thing is, does it replace Terra Mystica for me? No. But I was already such a big fan of what Terra Mystica was doing, which might be a bit of a spoiler for Terra Mystica being somewhere higher on my list, that I have room in my collection for 3 Terra Mystica style games. I have room for Terra Mystica, I have room for Gaia Project, and I have room for Clans of Caledonia. Do I have room for a 4th? Probably. If they come up with like a Terra Mystica 2nd edition or something like that, or another like follow-up game like a Gaia Project in maybe a completely different setting other than fantasy and space, I'm not sure what they would do next. I might just get that game too, because this formula really works for me. The thing that I have against this game is I feel like a lot of the game's changes, the things that were introduced in here, a lot of them are just side steps. They're not improvements per se. They're just things that operate differently and usually a little bit more multi-step and a little bit more complicated in terms of how they work. Like there was a sort of streamlined elegance in the way they worked in Terra Mystica, and then just when it comes to here, it's just there's more things going on that you have to factor in to do a similar element in this game. So it's probably why this is not the game that just kicked Terra Mystica out of my collection. But I mean, even if I had liked this one better, which I don't, and Terra Mystica will be coming up eventually. I don't think even if I liked this one better, that I would have just gotten rid of Terra Mystica. Because I don't want to restrict myself to just one Terra Mystica style game. I'm happy with multiple ones. And I think this and Terra Mystica are different enough games that it doesn't feel strange to have them in the same collection. And when you look at Clans of Caledonia, it's even more different than from either of these two games than Gaia Project and Terra Mystica are from each other. So I'm perfectly content to have with these all. This plays solo, which is a huge factor for why this one will probably continue to stay in my collection for a while, because I can't play Terra Mystica solo. There isn't a solo mode in that one, and I want to play this style of game sometimes solo, and I haven't had a chance to explore the different factions in this game the same way I've been able to explore them in Terra Mystica. Sometimes I do want the additional complications. Not all the time, but sometimes. And sometimes I just want to play a solo game of a Terra Mystica-esque style. And sometimes I want money and workers and not priests, because it's research here, I think. Sometimes I just want them to be on a track. No, I would like them as nice physical resources, despite the fact that this is a game that put a lot of its resources into a single track on your player board, and is still, I think, like over $100 just to get this one, just because there's so many components in here. I really like this game. Everything I like about it just is a little bit more direct to the point in Terra Mystica, I find. So we'll talk about that one later. Still, the revamped technology track here, where like every bump gives you something other than just endgame victory points, terrific. But it's still like a simpler system that used to exist in Terra Mystica, made much more complicated. And I didn't think it was a weakness in Terra Mystica, the fact that the tracks were kind of like just for points, but you could cash them in for resources depending on which tiles came out. I thought the system worked great. It was hard to grasp if you were new to the game. I still really like this one. There's a reason why it's within my top 25 at least. Okay, so that is my number 22, Gaia Project. And finally, rounding out this list is my number 21, A Feast for Odin, which is down 7 spots on my list. Its weight is about an 8, and it plays 1 to 4 players. So, A Feast for Odin is perhaps a game that seems like it should be considered more complex than my weight rating of an 8 for it, given that you have to explain, I believe, 61 different worker placement spots. The thing is, a lot of them are self-explanatory once you explain the principles of other similar spots in their area. And it's just like, oh, this one lets you trade this for that, and that arrow symbol means this lets you trade this other thing for that other thing. So it doesn't take as long to explain as you might think, and the core game itself is not... it's not even I don't think the most intricate Uwe Rosenberg game I've played. I think Le Havre, even though I've only played the digital version of that, might actually have more going on. Agricola, I think actually has more going on than this one. It's a game that combines two things that seem like they shouldn't go together. One is a worker placement game, and it's a fairly traditional worker placement game at that. But the other one is that it's a polyomino game, which means that you're placing these oddly shaped pieces onto your board, and you're doing that to improve your income, you're doing that to get yourself some points, you're doing that to... you're just essentially trying to do that to get yourself ahead. And but you can only place certain kinds of things on your board. They have to be upgraded to a certain point before they can go on your board. And even then, if you have green stuff on your board, it can't touch other green stuff except by diagonally. So there's just a lot of tricks to, like, how do you get things that are as large as you want them to be and covering up as many spaces as you want, and that are the right color. And then that's combined with the other sort of resources that you can get in the game, like you can get sheep and cattle, and you can breed them, as you might expect from an Uwe Rosenberg game. There's just a lot going on here. I've heard the Norwegians expansion for this is really helpful and helps balance the game. I don't think I'm good enough at this game to need to worry about the balance issues, to be honest. I mean, like, am I going to be pushing up the maximal possible scores based on how much is going on? This is a game that has, like, I think it's almost a game where the overwhelming part is not so much the rules, so much as just the amount of content. It's there, I already mentioned the 61 different worker placement spots. But then there's also the fact that there are tons and tons of these occupation cards that give you extremely specific bonuses. Like, they tend to be bonuses for, like, one specific worker placement spot on the board, that if you go there, you get to do it a little better than anyone else would. There's just a lot of content to go with. There's different strategies to approach. There's a lot I really like about this game, and I do like the sort of puzzle aspect as sort of like a side thing that's going on that you can sort of try to get your head around while you're also trying to maximize the efficiency of where you're placing your workers and how that's working out for you. It's a game that is not perhaps one I would recommend to new players at all, but it certainly fits with the theme that we were talking about of needing to plan ahead. Which, incidentally, like, you need to do that in Gaia Project and Coinbra and Takenu, for sure. Roll for the Galaxy a little bit for Lisboa, of course, and the crew, a lot of that too. So yeah, a lot of this list has that sort of elements here. But this one, because you're also having to plan ahead in a couple of different respects. One is like the actual resources that you're getting, and the other one is like how that's going to work for the boards that you get, because you can get additional boards where you can put down more tiles on top of in order to get even more bonuses, but you can potentially lose points if you can't fill them out the way you would like to. There's a lot going on. This is a game that I think experienced players will go, oh, that's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. And new players would go, what is even going on here? So it's an interesting balance that the game strikes, to say the least. I really like it. Maybe I should get the Norwegians expansion at some point and give that a try, because I've heard it lets you do animal breeding, and of course that would be the one strategy that I would want to do for sure in this game. That is my number 21 and last one on this list, A Feast for Odin. So that was my number 21 through 30 of my top 100 board games of all time. These games are fantastic, and I love the fact that we got to end on a run of 4 heavy Euros. Games in which I have more of than people that will actually play them with me, unfortunately. And it's not even close. I was very happy to talk about these games, but I am even more excited to get into my top 20 next time. So for now, just let me know what you thought and leave a comment, send me a message, whatever you want to do. And I will be happy to see you at the next set of 10. And until then, enjoy playing games, and don't send me the bill for all the games that you're buying because of my recommendations. Okay, bye-bye.